So I'm guessing you've clicked on this video because you're interested in or have thought about going into wildlife conservation, whether you're a young person who's just about to go to university or you're a bit older looking for a career change. Hi, I'm Adam. I currently work as a marine conservationist in the UK and have held down a number of jobs in various different environmental and nature conservation sectors. Today I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of working in wildlife conservation. These aren't just my experiences, they're experiences from talking to dozens of different people across the whole of the wildlife conservation sector. I'm also going to mention a few things that you might not necessarily have thought about. They're not necessarily good or bad, it's just something to think about along with the pros and cons that I'm going to list. It's worth noting that a lot of the pros and cons I'm going to list today are the same across the world, not just here in the UK where I happen to work. So hopefully you find something useful in this video. Enjoy it. I'm Adam and welcome to NatureScope. So let's get straight into it. The way I'm going to work it is I'm going to do a positive, a negative, and then something you might not have thought about. I've got 3 for each category, so hopefully you'll find something useful. Let's talk about the biggest positive of working in wildlife conservation, and that's of course job satisfaction. If I'm being completely honest, I can't remember the last time that I felt like I was going to work. I know it's my job and I wake up every single morning, but I'm sort of happy to do it. I really enjoy what I do. I get to go out every single day, I get to help wildlife, I get to go to these incredible nature reserves and environments and all these sorts of different things, and I get a huge amount of satisfaction and enjoyment from my job. This then adds to the ethos of the organisations you work in. There's not many sectors that I can think of in the world where every single person in it cares for and is working towards the same goal. Let's take sort of a finance office for example, and it may not be the case, but I'm just sort of giving an example. I imagine not every single person in the office 100% cares about what they're doing. A lot of people have got the job because they need a job, and that can often create sort of a mixed office environment. But in the environmental and wildlife conservation sector, every single person cares, and that means that the office atmospheres and the atmospheres across the company are really, really positive. I get to go to places and see things that not many people get to see. Private nature reserves, conferences, meeting just so many different people. It's really, really good. And the insane thing of it all is that I get paid to do it. I absolutely love my job. I'd probably be doing something similar in my free time anyway, so I've managed to make my job something that I really, really enjoy. There's a famous saying that if you find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life, and I'm in the lucky enough position to sort of have that. But with that job satisfaction comes our first negative, and that's pay. Jobs in the wildlife conservation sector do not pay well. For an entry-level job in the conservation sector, you can be looking at a minimum wage role, and that's pretty crazy to think about, especially when a lot of the time you might have gone to university and done a master's or even a PhD sometimes. And even when you start to progress up until like the head of department or CEO, those sort of jobs pay well for the sector, but their base salary is probably something similar you could get to someone doing banking at an entry-level role, so there's really not much scope for really, really high pay. So if you are thinking about going into wildlife conservation, you really need to think, does that job satisfaction outweigh the money you'd earn? And for a lot of people, it doesn't. When I've explained what the pay is like to some young people and showed them how hard some of the roles are to get for such little pay, it's often put them off, and I never intended to put them off at all. But it's just showing the sort of realistic scope of things. The jobs here are hard to get and aren't very well paid. There are definitely higher paying jobs in the conservation sector, but they often come with a lot of caveats. I am sort of a marine biologist by degree, so I know the marine sector a lot better, but I always use the example of oil and gas. Everyone knows that oil and gas is negative, it's doing lots of environmental damage, the government are really pushing it at the minute, but you can be a marine biologist for an oil and gas company and earn hundreds of thousands of pounds. However, you have to sort of live with that moral dilemma that you're facilitating the destruction of habitats. Often people who end up taking those jobs as well will get blacklisted from other places like charities and other different roles. If you've got that oil and gas sort of label on your CV, people will often want to stay well clear. It's not always the case, but I have seen it happen. So if you're really not sure, my top tip would be to get on the job websites. Go onto LinkedIn, countryside jobs, environment jobs, and whatever sort of environmental job websites are relevant to your country. Look at what jobs are available for the area you're interested in, whether that's sort of bird sciences, marine biology sciences, woodland sciences. Just take a look at what jobs are there for your interest and then look at how much they're paying, and that should give you a really good scope at what you'll earn if you make the switch or end up going into it after university, as well as the sort of progression that you can make in terms of pay and in terms of jobs. Whilst we're talking about jobs, here's the first thing that you might not have thought of. What sort of scientist or conservationist do you want to be? A lot of you are probably watching this video because you've been inspired by the likes of David Attenborough documentaries, where you see people going out on these huge field trips, filming and finding wildlife, and that's absolutely amazing if you want to do the fieldwork bits. There's dozens of other different sectors that you can go into. Do you want to be a lab scientist? Do you want to work in data analytics? You don't even have to leave the house, you can work from home and still work in wildlife conservation now. It's completely changed. It's also worth mentioning that even the fieldwork heavy roles I'm lucky enough to do, there's probably equal amounts of time spent at your desk replying to emails, attending meetings, writing reports, as there is actually going out onto the nature reserves and trying to help wildlife. So it's just something to think about. On to the second round of positives now. And it's got to be the unbelievable experiences that you have the opportunity to do and have. I've been fortunate enough throughout university and the various different jobs I have to have some absolutely unbelievable opportunities. Whether it's the opportunity to visit nature reserves, private nature reserves, and have tours, places where people don't often get to go, and having experiences with wildlife that a lot of the general public don't often get to have. Things like attending conferences where there's like-minded people, experts, people you see on TV attending, they're pretty special. Or even the opportunity to present at conferences. I'm one of those people that loves to talk about the work I do, so I love giving a presentation. I understand that's not for everyone, but being able to show off what you're doing to some of those people that you recognise from the TV or from scientific papers and stuff like that is pretty amazing. Probably the craziest opportunity I've had throughout my time in wildlife conservation was when I was asked to be a scientific advisor on a theatre production. So we had to go in, watch the cast rehearse, and this was a theatre production on global warming. So we'd watch them rehearse, we'd sort of look at the script, we'd look at the set and try and basically make it scientifically accurate for the production. Like, what other industry would I get the opportunity to do that? That's insane. On to the second negative now, and that is that it's quite far behind in terms of hiring people. Most of the jobs that you will see advertised require you to have either an undergraduate degree, so just a standard degree, or a master's. Some minimum wage jobs will even demand a master's at the minute. It's really competitive and it's pretty sort of stuck in its ways. A lot of industries seem to be moving forward with that a degree is not necessary, maybe an apprenticeship, things like that. But the wildlife conservation sector is definitely still in that you need a degree camp. The good news is that I've met a fair few people who don't have wildlife-based degrees who've managed to get a job in the sector, so it does seem to be slowly moving forward, but it's very much still the case. So here's my top tip for anyone who can't or doesn't want to go to university, and it's simply get any experience you can and start today. Whether it's volunteering or paid experience, it doesn't matter. This is an industry, and like most industries anywhere else really, that rely on you having that experience. There's no way you're going to get a wildlife conservation job without a degree or without any experience. So go and volunteer at your local wildlife trust. Go to the local animal shelter and see if they need a hand. Just do anything you can to get your foot in the door. Now for the second thing you might not have thought about, and that's career progression. How do you want to progress moving up the ladder? Like most industries in wildlife conservation, there is room to grow and progress through the company up to CEO level if you really wanted to, but there are caveats to it. I am mainly a field worker, so most of what I do is outdoors, but the higher I would move up in the sort of corporate ladder, I suppose, the less time I'd spend outdoors, the more time I'd spend writing reports, applying for funding, in meetings, just doing general admin. Whereas now I've got a really good balance of desk-based work and also going out quite a bit of the time. But the people in the higher up of most of the companies I've worked for barely ever leave the office. Now, if you decide you want to be a work from home conservationist working on reports or data analytics, this might not matter to you at all, but someone like me who loves being outdoors, this really does matter, and it almost already puts a ceiling of where I want to go. I don't want to go much higher because I don't want to have to sit at my desk all day every day. Third and final positive of the video is the opportunity you might get to travel. A lot of the jobs you see will either give you the chance to travel around the county you work in, perhaps even the country, or even to other countries. Whether it's simply popping over the border for a conference, or perhaps you're working on multiple different projects across multiple different countries, there's plenty of opportunity to see the world. In my first 2 roles, I was a field ecologist working across the UK. I made a video on that, so I'll leave a link in the description and at the top of the screen. But I saw so much of the UK, over 100 different locations that I'd have never gone to if it wasn't for the job. I got the opportunity to go to Northern Ireland, up to Scotland, Wales, just the whole of the UK that I saw in a 2-year space, and I'd never have done that otherwise. A lot of the people I went to university with now work in these beautiful places like Indonesia and the Maldives, scuba diving every single day. There's so much opportunity to see the world and see incredible wildlife. I even know one person who leads a coral restoration project. Monday to Friday, they're in a different country every single week, and then they get flown back on the weekends and see their family. It's an absolutely amazing job, and I'm sure lots of you watching the video would love that. So the opportunity to travel is definitely a huge positive. On to our final negative now, and that's job availability, competitiveness and security, and I've linked all 3 of those points into one sort of single section. A lot of the really good jobs in the wildlife conservation sector are few and far between, and there's a few reasons for that. The main one is that the jobs themselves are really cool, and that people who get those jobs will stay in them often for 2 or 3 decades. A lot of the time, if you find a job that has really good pay and a lot of what you're looking for, people will just not leave it unless they're forced to. This makes those jobs really competitive. When I was first applying for jobs in the sector, I was receiving rejection emails that were saying we've had over 500 applicants for one specific role, and often these were minimum wage entry-level roles, so you're competing against 500 other people for one job that doesn't even pay that well compared to other sectors. It can take quite a while to get your foot in the door also. I'm 5 years out of university now. However, it took me a long time to get my foot in the door. I applied for over 200 jobs before I got my first interview. I just had to keep plugging away, getting rejection email after rejection email. It was disheartening at times, but I'm glad I kept at it. Then, to top it all off, you've worked so hard to get that job, and it's not even 100% guaranteed to be permanent. In the environmental sector, you often deal with jobs that are externally funded, and if this funding ever dries up, that means your job may well be gone if funding can't be found elsewhere. You have to remember that a lot of companies and charities work off money. It's not generated income, it's money that they receive from the government perhaps, or from other sort of environmental bodies, things like that. And if the money's not there, neither is your job. A lot of the jobs, especially at the start, are 1-year rolling contracts, so you might have a year's worth of funding, see how the project goes, see how your job goes, and then might be able to find another year's worth of funding. You're never really 100% secure. There are some permanent jobs, however. These often tend to be sort of mid-career level jobs that are always needed, but if you're entry-level, early career, then a lot of the jobs won't be secure, and it is something that's always in the back of your head. Even the job I'm in now isn't 100% guaranteed, so I'm constantly thinking, will I have a job next year? What will I do if I don't? And it is a worry. The final point in today's video is one last thing you might not have thought about, and that's work-life balance. Okay, yes, you've got an incredibly cool job, but you often see a lot of people's jobs become their lives, and that's something I really don't want to happen. I love my job is not my life. In places like the UK, this isn't so bad because there's lots more laws and legislation to stop companies exploiting people and having you overwork. But I see a lot of my friends, especially in sort of places like the Maldives or various other countries like that, who work 12-hour days, 6 days a week for very, very little pay. Now, don't get me wrong, these people have the coolest jobs in the world. They're scuba diving with manta rays, whale sharks, you know, great white sharks every single day, but they're working incredibly long hours and it's extremely tiring. It sort of links back to, does that job satisfaction outweigh the pay and your free time? So that's it for this video. Hopefully there was something in it that you found interesting or useful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll happily try and answer them. And if you want me to make a part 2, leave that in the comments below as well, because I've got a lot more points and a lot more discussion topics that I can talk about. If you enjoyed the video, leave us a like, it really, really helps us out, and consider subscribing to Naturescope to not miss any more future content. I don't just talk about sort of wildlife conservation jobs, we have a whole load of other different videos, mainly to do with the environment, so go and check them out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Cheers.